President Trump's pardon of conservative firebrand Dinesh D'Souza continues to raise questions. D'Souza pleaded guilty to violating campaign finance laws back in 2014. D'Souza says that the president pardoned him because the president wants D'Souza to be able to spread his principles. So here now to respond and talk about all this is Dinesh D'Souza. Mr. D'Souza, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Okay, so there's been a lot of debate, as you know, about your pardon and what it signifies. What message do you think the president was trying to send by pardoning you?
I think he was trying to send the message that there was a political hit on me by the Obama administration, a kind of selective prosecution for an offense that is an offense, but is normally considered a technical offense that gets community service and maybe a fine. But in my case, to quote President Trump, they went after you with everything they got. This is the Holder Justice Department and Preet Bharara, the prosecutor in New York. And so Trump basically said, I want to set this injustice right and clear your record. And so that's what the pardon did.
And I've heard you say that before, that you think that you were sort of politically persecuted, but you pled guilty. Why did you plead guilty if you didn't think that you were guilty?
Because the government in these cases uses all kinds of strong-arm tactics behind the scenes. For example, they will say, we're going to get you for mail fraud. And you say, mail fraud? They say, yeah, because you put the check in the mail. We're going to get you for bank fraud. Bank fraud? Right. Yeah, because you withdrew the money from the bank. Right. We're going to put additional charges on you that carry 5 years in prison. Now, Allison, would you risk 5 years in prison? What would that do to your life and your career? So
I understand.
What
but
they
this
do
is what
they
prosecutors
bludgeon you.
do. I mean, just to be clear, this is what prosecutors do in every case. You make a deal about to get a guilty plea, and prosecutors tell you what you're facing. I mean, this is basically, Dinesh.
Well, it's not what you're facing. It's not what you're facing.
It is what you're facing. I mean, these are the options. They lay out your options. This happens in every single criminal case I've ever covered. And so the idea that you were politically persecuted, you didn't have to plead guilty. And as the prosecutor, Preet Bharara, has said, this was sort of garden variety campaign finance law stuff. Let me play it for you, what he says about you being treated unfairly or not, and then you can respond. Listen to this.
The questions about whether or not he was treated unfairly was litigated in the court. The judge, very well respected, Judge Berman, listened to the arguments about that, said it was all hat, no cattle. There was no evidence of that whatsoever.
Go ahead.
Well, first of all, Judge Berman is a Clinton appointee who, as part of my sentence, sentenced me to mandatory psychiatric counseling. I mean, what could be crazier than that? Am I Jeffrey Dahmer who put bodies in the refrigerator? I gave money to a college friend of mine who was running for office. So the very fact that this kind of nonsense is going on.
You use straw donors, which is illegal. And you pleaded guilty to it. But either way, look, I understand that
Yes, but look, here's the point. Allison, no American in this country's history has ever been prosecuted, let alone locked up, for doing what I did.
But I'm not sure
remember,
that's
justice
true.
isn't just a matter of did you do it.
I just want to fact check
It is true. It is true.
A simple Google check of campaign finance violations turns up all sorts of people who are convicted of these sorts of things. As you know, there was a Clinton donor who actually went to jail for much more time than you went to the halfway house. This is a real crime. People are often prosecuted for this.
No, that's simply not true. If you look at those cases, and my lawyer, Ben Brafman, compiled an extensive list of these. If you look at these cases, in virtually every single case, the government prosecutes a repeat offender, kind of like Rosie O'Donnell, who exceeded the campaign finance law on 5 different occasions.
Yes, but didn't use straw donors
there's
like
corruption
you did,
involved, some sort of a deal,
amount of money that you did.
some kind of a quid pro quo. Remember, there's no corruption even alleged in my case. So if you can find me a case, Allison, where somebody gave 20 grand with no corruption and got a more severe penalty than I did, I will completely withdraw this claim.
Okay. What I want to move on to is what you said on Fox about what the president said to you in his phone call about why he pardoned you, because I thought it was really interesting. He basically said he wanted you to be a bigger voice than ever, defending the principles that you believe in. And so I want to just hear what those principles are. And I have some, I think, as reflected in your Twitter feed. So let's just go through this if this captures what your principles are. So February 2015, you tweeted about President Obama. And there are people here, racist overtones here. You can take the boy out of the ghetto, you say, watch this vulgar man show his stuff while America cowers in embarrassment. You had another tweet in 2010 about President Obama's father. You say this philandering, inebriated African socialist is what you call him. Oh, sorry, that's from a Forbes magazine. So I'm confused. What are the principles that you are hoping to be able to talk about now and spread?
Well, Allison, first of all, I'd be happy to talk about those two tweets. Obama's father was a philandering, inebriated African socialist, as a matter of fact.
And just out of that, hold on. Are you anti-philandering?
Look, I'm not talking about this. I was referring to Obama's book, Dreams from My Father. Hold on. Let me talk about principles.
The philandering, and I want to know if your principle, are you anti-philandering? Are you anti-vulgarity in your first one?
Philandering is not a principle. What I was saying is that Obama claims himself that he derived his dreams, his principles, from his father. And the Forbes magazine article listed what those principles were. It's not unreasonable to investigate that. Look, I'm a mainstream conservative. I worked in the Reagan administration. I've worked at the most reputable conservative think tanks, from AEI to the Hoover Institution. Yeah. The very idea that you can define me by a tweet or two over a long career is preposterous.
I'm not trying to define you, but I am trying to figure out what your principles are. And they seem confusing, because you are obviously a supporter of President Trump's, and the idea that you would go after President Obama's father for philandering and for being vulgar, that strikes some as hypocritical. Why aren't you speaking out about President Trump's philandering? Why aren't you speaking out about his vulgarity?
Well, look, my argument about Obama wasn't about philandering. Obama is not a philanderer. His father was, but Obama wasn't.
Sure,
I was focusing on the anti-colonial ideology. The anti-colonial ideology of Barack Obama Sr., which was imbibed by the younger Obama. And my book really focuses on all that. It's not a sleazy attack on an individual. It's an examination of ideas.
Okay, but when you say to somebody, you can take the boy out of the ghetto, it is a sleazy attack on an individual.
Well, look, here's Obama in the White House, and he's got this selfie stick, and he's running around looking in the mirror and making ridiculous faces.
And that's what
if people say that Trump has degraded the... Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead. So you find that more degrading than things that you've heard in the past year in terms of vulgarity coming from the White House?
Look, in fairness, I have to say, we have seen a great degradation of the White House. And this didn't start with Trump. It didn't even start with Obama. It really goes back to Clinton, because I think there was a lowering of the tone in the 90s. And I'm sorry to see all this. I'm actually sorry to see the... No, I wouldn't say. In some ways he hasn't, but I think he is also a product of an environment that's very destructive. Look, this personal attacks
he's setting the tone?
That Trump... no, because I think that Republicans have said, basically, in the past we nominated Boy Scouts like Romney, people who are squeaky clean, and the left launched such attacks on these people that they ended up looking like Lucifer. We're finally going to appoint a tough guy who can take it and can return a punch. And so Trump, yes, I think he's in a much more in the mud, if you might say. And I regret that this is the environment we now live in, but we do.
There's one more tweet that I want to bring up with you, and it's about the Parkland students, and where you said after they went through the massacre, and then they were trying to fight gun violence, and they won some and they lost some, and you said worst news since their parents told them to get summer jobs. You apologized for that, and I'm sure that those kids appreciated that apology, but it was so shocking, frankly, the first one, that you would go after these kids who had just lived through a killing field. What principle is that you were trying to communicate there going after them?
I got to tell you honestly that was a case where I was trying to make a point that completely misfired, and I take the full responsibility. As I saw it, and this is how you get into the heat of the battle in social media, that those kids were becoming pawns in a kind of political campaign. They were being manipulated by other people. They were being, for example, dragged down to the legislature where a vote was taking place.
Well, but
and
they
so my
marched there on
target
their
was
own.
really the media
they marched
manipulation.
There on their own. They weren't dragged there. These kids were really motivated and marched there on your own. I hear what you're saying. That's how you saw it, but the facts just don't support that.
Well, what I'm saying is that, in general, teenagers do not have the sophistication to be able to track legislative votes and show up in the right place at the right time and pose for the media as if they are stars on a TV show.
I've heard this argument before,
I'm saying
but teenagers protest all the time. Teenagers are passionate. I mean, this is what happened in the 60s. I mean, we've had this argument before. You didn't believe that I get it. You didn't think that they were acting of their own accord, but they did. But still, I appreciate you saying that tweet was a misfire. But in terms of principles and of elevating the conversation and of changing what you say about the degradation of everything we're talking about, that principle is just so reprehensible to go after them.
It is reprehensible to go after them, and I'm very sorry I did, and as you know, I apologize for it. So yes, look, I think that was unfortunate. I also think that one tends to, in social media, get sort of drawn into these sort of Twitter battles with people, and I'm going to be more careful about that in the future.
Thanks. I appreciate you saying all of that. That is certainly true. Twitter is perhaps not the best of us. One last question. Did you meet President Trump before he pardoned you?
I've never met President Trump in my life. I had spoken to him once before on the telephone, but I've never met him. And the time I talked to him to get my pardon was only the second time I've spoken to him ever.
And so when you, for instance, had done your anti-Obama film, you hadn't gone to Trump Tower and had any meetings there or talked to anybody there?
Never. Trump did tweet out, I believe, at that time that people should go see the film, but I've never met the man before.
And so now that you have been pardoned, what is your plan for spreading your word more, as the president encouraged you to do?
Well, it's to continue doing what I'm doing, and hopefully with a more magnified voice. I've got a new book and movie coming out later this summer. I don't want to go into it because I don't want to use the pardon as a way to promote things I'm doing, but I've been very excited with my current work, and I'm in the final editing stage of the movie, which will be out in August.
Okay, Dinesh D'Souza, thank you for being here. We appreciate you getting your perspective on all of this.
Thank you.